Hi, good morning. This is Mayor Valensky with the Driving Markets podcast on Thursday, June the 12th. Let's discuss what is going on regarding gold and silver. In addition to that, we'll discuss the proposed legislation that's looking to go through Congress in the US to audit the Fort Knox holding, or the supposed Fort Knox holding of gold. So let's start off with the Fort Knox audit. So gold has not been audited in the US for around about 6 decades, and it's not had a full audit whereby the audit includes who actually owns the gold. What does that mean, who actually owns the gold? Well, gold within Fort Knox, assuming that gold is there, my overall guess is that gold is in Fort Knox. But number one, what type of quality is it, is a question we need to ask. And number two, who actually owns it? What does that mean? Well, the gold in Fort Knox is probably owned by other government sovereign funds and even leased out. So for every 1 ounce of gold there is in Fort Knox, the question is, who actually owns it? And that's what Donald Trump and Congress, or some proponents of the new legislation in Congress, are looking for complete transparency as far as gold is concerned. Let's have a look and see how much gold is actually there. That's the question they want to raise. And in addition to that, or they want to answer to, in addition to that, considering that is the US taxpayers' gold, then where is it? Who does it belong to? And is it really owned by the US? Now, there is definitely some confusion as to, has the gold been leased out? So has 1 ounce of gold been leased out as a loan to several individuals or several governments? And that's one of the things that the audit needs to ascertain. So it will not just be an audit of how much gold is in Fort Knox. It will also be a opening up the seals, opening up the boxes, checking that the gold is there, which is not being done. And Scott Bessant of the US Treasury is stating that the gold's fine, we don't need an audit because the seals are still on the boxes. Well, those seals could be on the boxes, but is the gold actually in the crates? So the audit that's being proposed to go through Congress would give a open, transparent assessment analysis of what gold is held in Fort Knox. In addition to that, it is well known and public knowledge that the quality of the gold in Fort Knox is not good. So what needs to be done is all the gold, assuming there is gold there, needs to be taken out and refined to bring it up to global standards. It is below global standards and it is mixed in with other metals. So it's not liquid, it's got no liquidity. In addition to that, it's got no movable value. So the gold would have to be taken out, refined, brought up to global international standards, and then as the audit is done, that would give not only transparency, but restore confidence back into the US taxpayer and back into the US citizen. On top of that, there is a legislation that's passed in Florida that makes gold and silver normal currency, normal tradable currency, where you can actually buy goods with gold and buy goods with silver. Up until recently, there was a tax on gold and on sale of goods up to $500. So if you went to a pawnbroker or you went to buy gold at less than $500, there would be a tax on that, and it would be a taxable event. Now that has been taken away, so you can actually use gold and silver as an original Mother Nature, hardcore, earth-producing, real currency that can be used in goods. Now, the Fed and the other central banks globally are not happy with this. One of the things Germany's doing, by the way, is looking to repatriate its gold holdings back to within the borders of Germany. At the moment, according to an understanding or analysis, that German gold is held in the US, assuming it is still there, not being leased out or sold off or melted down. but Germany wants to repatriate its gold back to its German borders, and that would indicate a lack of confidence in the overall position of where America, the US, is standing regarding gold itself. So what you do have now is a movement whereby people recognize that gold has to be held within its borders. Now, the UK sold its gold under Gordon Brown for $200 billion when it was around about $200 an ounce. That was back in the 1990s. Can't remember the exact date. I think it was 1994. Could be wrong on that one. Have to check it out. And so the UK's got no gold holding. However, gold being the real asset is a frightening thought to the Fed and other central banks, because it gives you, the individual, the independence to do what you want with the gold. Now, as long as you've got independence, it means you don't need the central banks, which means that the role of the central banks, which its main role is to print money, cause inflation, and make sure it's got a lower pound or a lower dollar or a lower euro, that is going to be taken away. So they don't like the fact that individuals can have access to a real asset that is inflation proof. And as long as the banks are going to be printing money, which they are going to be printing money, then you're going to have a setup where gold is going to continue moving higher. In addition to that, obviously, silver is moving higher. And we've seen recently in the last few years that gold has got an upward trajectory, and that will continue as long as there's inflation and as long as banks keep printing money, which has no real value and a decreasing value as the years go on. So any individual who's of any common sense will be looking to get on board regarding gold and regarding silver. Now, there is obviously physical gold and there is paper gold, but with the physical gold, you'll need somewhere a safe deposit in order to hold the physical gold. But paper gold can be traded on a non-stop basis. Now you've got states like Florida, Oklahoma, Utah, Louisiana accepting legislation, accepting gold as a everyday payment method. Then we are going back to the original standard of where gold and silver, which should have been used for years, can be reused. In addition to that, there is a call after the audit of Fort Knox that they will go back to the gold standard. Now, the gold standard would be a hell of an achievement, but also a significant task, because the gold standard would mean that the gold would have to be increased dramatically in the American holdings to make the dollar go back, and that would reevaluate the dollar and stop the dollar falling. One of the countries that's trying to do that is China. China is buying significant amount of gold and actually selling its US treasuries, which are now growing into a characterization of worthless. So they've realized that the US treasuries are not significant, are worthless, and that the US has defaulted on US treasuries already several times. Back in 1933, when FDR decoupled the gold standard from the bonds, where a person could cash in US treasuries, and he decoupled that. That was default number one. And default number two on the US treasuries was back in 1971, when Nixon decoupled the gold standard from the dollar, decoupled the dollar from the gold standard. Those essentially were default because it allowed the Fed and the central banks and the governments to print unlimited amount of dollars, which means that your US Treasury bond would automatically fall in value. So there has been a default on US Treasuries, whereby there's no default on gold and no default on silver. Now, not only that, silver and gold are not traceable, where dollar bills and other types of controlled central bank assets are traceable. Therefore, gold has become untraceable. It's a decentralized asset, and therefore central banks do not like it, because again, goes back to the same argument. We're taking away the control of the central banks and putting the control back in the hands of the individual. And they don't want the individual citizen to have control of their financial goals. So gold and silver is an essential part of your portfolio. And I've been saying this for a while now, even though for years I've not invested heavily in gold or in silver. But in the last few years, understanding the decay of the fiscal global monetary setup, then gold and silver are go-to assets. The other go-to asset is Bitcoin, but we'll have a separate podcast on that in order to discuss it. If you want to join the membership on Driving Markets, you can go to the website drivingmarkets.com. You can inquire there, or you can contact us on Instagram or on YouTube. We're more than happy to onboard you, or you can email us from the website. There's a contact form. And if you need any more information, please contact me. You can download this podcast on any of your most favorable platforms. This is Mayor Vilensky with Driving Markets. Have a good day.